So I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll read our little electronic meeting notice once JT or Jennifer, there we go. All right. Notwithstanding any other provision in the EDA bylaws to the contrary, as permitted under Albemarle County's Continuity of Government Ordinance adopted on November 18, 2020, Chapter 1283 of the 2020 Acts of the General Assembly enacted into law on April 24th, 2020, and the resolution of this body adopted on April 21st, 2020, we are holding this meeting by real-time electronic means with no authority member physically present at a single central location. All authority members are participating electronically. This meeting is being held in accordance with Section 6 of the county's Continuity of Government Ordinance. All authority members will identify themselves and state their general physical location by electronic means during the roll call vote, which we will hold next. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county's website. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone, both as provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is invited to send questions, comments, and suggestions to the authority through the county's Economic Development Office at any time. The public is also invited to offer live comment during the meeting's public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and must be germane to the matters on today's agenda. So, Richie, you want to call the roll?
I will. So we'll just start with the chair, Mr. Long.
Present in the city of Charlottesville.
Mr. Munson.
Present in the city of Charlottesville.
Let's see, Mr. Ray.
Give him just 2 seconds to pop in.
Well, I can go down. Mr. Shreve.
Present in Nelson County.
Let's see, Ms. Imhoff.
Present in Albemarle County.
All right, Mr. McNaught.
Checked in.
Mr. Ray. Mr. Ray, you're present. Where are you located? Mr. Ray?
He may have
George?
lost the connection.
Yeah.
Let's see, Mr. McNaughton. Is he not here? And Ms. McKeel.
Here in Albemarle County.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have a quorum. I see
Okay.
Mr. Ray, and I've heard Mr. Ray. So I think I'm going to count him present.
Can anybody hear me?
Oh, we can now.
Yes, we can.
I don't believe George can hear us.
Well, he's muted now.
Yeah, I can't hear him now.
How am I doing now?
There we go. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hey, Jennifer, can you?
Roger, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
We can hear you, George. Jennifer, can you step away and give George a call and see if you can walk him through how to unmute his microphone, and then JT, you can run the show here, I guess, from behind the scenes.
So why don't we, I don't know if Jennifer, do we have anybody who from the public who wants to speak?
We do not have anybody signed up.
All right. All right, then let's.
Jennifer, I can't hear you guys.
Okay. Jennifer, you want to help him, and we'll continue on.
I'm working on it.
All right. So approval of the minutes. Are there any comments on the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion regarding the minutes?
Move to approve.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved. Financial report,
We have only a slight change in our overall balance sheet. Interest payment to us recorded for the month of December, $202.47, which gives us a total of interest deposits thus far this fiscal year of $1247.31. Our cash position is changed by that small amount. The total cash on hand remains at, let's see if I've got this figure handy. No, that's not it. $719,386.81. No other changes in disbursements or income since we last met.
okay? Great, thanks, Dave. So next is new business.
Okay, I hear you, but just barely.
Um, So we have, the first thing on the agenda is the Afton Scientific BJIP agreement. I have to recuse myself because I have represented Tom and Afton Scientific for a long time. So George was going to take over, but since he is,
Here, he's back.
he's back.
Yes.
George, you there?
We need to unmute him.
I'm here.
All right, George, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, so we're good to go. You are now in charge because we are now at the point of the agenda where the Afton Scientific matter is up, and I'm going to recuse myself. Jennifer is going to take me out of the meeting and put me in the audience during this section.
Okay, give me 2 seconds to pop him out. Okay. Okay, Mr. Long is back in the audience. Mr. Ray, can you hear us still?
Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer, you're going to promote Mr. Thorpe?
Yes, I'm working on that too. As he's coming in, I will go ahead and start introducing him if you like. This afternoon, we have Tom Thorpe, CEO of Afton Scientific with us. Tom is the CEO of Afton Scientific, a small-scale contract manufacturer of sterile injectable drugs. Mr. Thorpe started Afton Scientific after serving as a chemical engineer in a large pharma and later graduating from the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. The firm currently employs over 600 persons that serve various critical manufacturing, engineering, and laboratory roles in the production of new drugs and products for chemical trials or commercial distribution. These include therapies for cystic fibrosis, breast cancer, immune deficiencies, and infant digestive health. The addition of 8,000 square feet supports the launch of sterile filling operations within Afton Scientific's second clean room facility. Afton hopes to hire additional engineers, warehouse packaging, floor operations, and laboratory technicians with this expansion. Mr. Thorpe, the floor is yours.
Oh, there we go. Son of a gun. It works. Jennifer, thank you for the introduction. As a matter of record, you just killed my HR department. We don't have 600 employees. We have 60.
Oh, did I say 600? I'm sorry.
So we need to hire more HR. So thank you very much. We're very excited. we appreciate the support the county has made, and certainly Jennifer, your team, and everyone there in economic development. We're busting out of our seams, and we have a number of good projects. I actually just was handed another hiring document here.
Everyone. Thank you, Jennifer.
So I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good. I actually have handed to me a little while ago a form to hire one more employee as I was just sitting here. So I'll do that as we speak. Very excited. So just to show you an example, a couple of the drugs, this one here we make is for people with immune deficiencies. It's plasma from people that has been isolated that has antibodies in it. There's a version that we don't handle that's used for COVID. So that's here. This is another product that's coming online now. Just started last year, which is for infant gut, and it supplies can you see all that? Yeah, there you go. It's actually behind me too. See the picture. That's for reconstituting. It's a probiotic for infants, and that'll get rolled out nationwide. It's very, very excited. A lot of major companies are going to be backing it, and we'll be making that right here in our third facility. So anyway, what we do is we take the ingredients and we mix it up and we put it in these, sterilize it and put it in these vials and cap and crimp it and give it back to the customer. We're small pharma.
JT, do you have the presentation back up so we can go over the details?
Yep. Here's the some of the specifics.
So piggybacking off of what Tom said, this is a $500,000 capital investment, 8,000 square feet expansion, creating 20 new jobs, not 200, 20 new jobs, with the average wage of $48,500. The wage range is $19 to $48. VDP just recently announced, the governor Northam recently announced a VGIP agreement for $15,000, $750 per job. Albemarle County is proposing $10,000, $500 per job. In your package, you received in the agenda materials, you received an agreement as well as a resolution. Are there any questions at this point? If not, Mr. Chair or Mr. Vice Chair, the floor is now yours.
Do you want me to read the resolution?
Richie, do we need to read the resolution?
I don't, it was included in the package. I'm not hearing that there's any request to change it. In terms of the materials, it's my understanding they're available to the public on the website. Is that correct, Jennifer?
Yes, sir, it is.
So I think if the members are comfortable with the contents of the resolution, then I think we can move forward with a motion to approve it. We would need a motion and then a second on that.
Can I ask one procedural question? And Jennifer, maybe you already saw, did any member of the public want to comment on anything on the agenda, including this project?
There were nobody signed up from the public to speak at this meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Well, with that, I will make a motion to go ahead and approve the agreement.
Okay, if there aren't any changes to the written document that's in our packets, and if there aren't any members of public that want to comment, the motion has been made to approve the resolution. All in favor, please say aye.
I think we may need a second.
Yeah,
I
did we
don't
have
know.
a second?
Oh, okay. May I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Mr. Thorpe, thank you for attending the meeting. We're going to send you back to the audience.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you for coming. This is great news for Albemarle.
Yeah, man.
We're very,
It's
We're very
exciting.
excited.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Mr. Lynch and Mr. Long.
All right, great. So our next presentation is going to be from Peter Lynch regarding the Albemarle County Assessment Report. Welcome, Peter.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now. And if you could just let me know that you can see my presentation. Okay.
Yeah.
Looks great.
All right, well, thank you very much for inviting me to present this information today. I'm the county assessor, and we conduct an annual reassessment in Albemarle County. So every year we reassess every property. And this is the presentation that I provide to the Board of Supervisors every January. So Ms. McKeel has already seen this, but you know, I try to present, you know, what has happened in the reassessment, you know, like what are the results, the new assessment results, but also information to kind of build up our credibility in the process of creating those assessments. So some of the information I'm going to show you is related to that. And I actually haven't met a lot of you, so it's very nice meeting you in this meeting today. So first of all, is kind of a reminder of what my office does. So like I said, we reassess every property in the county every year. What the reassessment actually involves is that we don't look at 45,000 properties or 47,000 properties every year, because that's just not possible. What we try to do and what our guidelines are to look at every property at least every 5 years. So that includes about 20% of properties every year. And that includes physical visits to a property. It could include looking at the properties through our aerial photographs called pictometry program, which gives us a pretty good look at buildings. We can measure with that, and we can get a lot of information that way. But you can never replace that on-site visit. So we try to get out there as much as we can. We validate any sales that have taken place to make sure they're arm's length transfers, they're not related parties, anything like that that would affect them actually creating or indicating market value for us. And we have a valuation model that we use. We have a valuation model for residential properties, and then we have valuation models for different types of commercial properties. So we update those models each year. New construction is kind of our second major category. All new improvements that are buildings that are being built, we will go out and inspect them and measure them when they're complete. We also, other than them being complete, every January we are required to add whatever exists at that point to the tax rolls. So if a building is 50% complete in January 1st, we'll pick up 50% of the value at that point. The third major function that we have is land use, the agriculture and forestry side of land use the program that we administer. Land use is a very kind of complex program, and what we do to make sure people are in compliance on an ongoing basis is we conduct a biennial revalidation, and that process requires them, the property owners, in coordination with a farmer, if they have a farmer, turn in paperwork to us identifying the work that they do, the production that they do for agriculture, if they've got forestry, if they have a forestry plan, things like that, so that we can then go out and make sure that that activity is going on. We also get new applications for properties that want to enter the program, and we also work rollbacks on properties when the use has changed from a qualified use to a non-qualified use. And that could be where you build a house and the land underneath the house used to be a hayfield, but now it's a home site. So it would cause a rollback of those taxes. So, and the way this program works is we actually recover. You don't just start paying regular taxes going forward. We actually recovered by state law the 5 previous years of taxes that were deferred, plus interest. So that can be a major program for us. And this slide, and as I go through this slide, is kind of the part that we are building that credibility in the work that we do. And one of those things we're doing is to improve the quality of the data that we have. When I came here a little over 5 years ago, you know, one of the things I identified is that we really needed to clean up our data on the properties in order to do a better valuation of the properties. So the first thing we are doing that I wanted to show you is it increases our efficiency. And it's kind of the way our model is set up. And this is kind of a technical thing. I won't get too deeply into it, but if in the past we organized our properties into 2 smaller groups. And when you have 2 smaller groups, you have too few sales or no sales within those groups in order to determine what the market value is. So what we've been doing over the last few years is consolidating small neighborhoods into larger neighborhoods. This is mainly relating to residential properties, but it gives us a lot better data to compare when we use our model to come up with those values. The next item, which increases our accuracy, is that we have been sketching, and when I say sketching, I mean doing an electronic sketch within our CAMA system in which we keep all our data and create our values. In the past, we've had a lot of hand-drawn sketches that were kind of legacy sketches we had in our office. And then there might have been a hand-calculated square footage on a house that was then entered into our system. Now we actually sketch that house. The square footage is calculated by the computer, so it's more accurate. We often find at least small adjustments due to those, and sometimes, you know, larger adjustments. Sometimes we find in this process that there was a second floor on the house that we were assessing, but there was no second floor on the house. I mean, things can be that drastic in the data that we're correcting. So this process has been, you know, a 5-year process of adding these sketches in. The COVID-19 pandemic has actually given us an opportunity to get a lot more sketches in than we normally do this year. So when we normally look for to get 4,000 or 5,000 in a year, and that's a good year, we finished 14,000 this year, and I'm very proud of that and where we've been able to clean up that much data and do that much a better job on those properties. And then better results. This relates to land use. So something we've done recently is we've, I believe it was in the 2019 budget, we got a new position for a land use administrator. So we actually have somebody focusing on the land use program. And we've been able to identify a lot of properties that were not in compliance, and we just didn't have the manpower to keep up with those checks. So just in this last year, we were able to work 135 rollbacks. And on average, we do about 30 in a year. So that's a huge improvement in cleaning up this program. The rollbacks added up to almost $1 million in taxes. And going forward, the properties that are then that part of the property or the entire property that's then taken out of land use has $34 million that would have been deferred that is no longer deferred. So, so these are really important to the county budget. So I'm going to jump straight from that into our results for this year. And I presented on this slide so that we can kind of see over time how that annual reassessment looks over the last 10 years. So as you can see here, the tax base increased 1.4%. So this is all the properties in the county, commercial and residential. And but you can see back in the earlier years during the after the financial crisis and the issues that real estate had with the valuations. And then after we pulled out of that and started the recovery and how that has looked each year. So that just provides a little bit of perspective. I always provide a breakdown by magisterial district so that each of the supervisors can see how their district is comparing to the overall average. So this slide simply shows that. The important thing that you'll see some more numbers on upcoming slides that kind of explain what's going on here, but those districts that have more commercial are the ones that are going down, and the ones with less commercial are going up, and the least commercial are going up the most. We also break down our value changes by the state codes, or what they're called class codes. And you can see the definitions on here. Generally 1, 2, 5, and 6 are really residential type properties, with 5 and 6 being more agriculture or larger acreage. 3 is your multifamily, your apartments, and then all of your commercial properties fall under 4. And as you can see here, our overall change on commercial properties is down 5.5%, with multifamily down a little bit. And I'll get into kind of a breakdown, and I think the next slide that kind of explains some of that. So here, and I've included residential over on the right side just as a comparison. So the residential, this is not a mixed use property or anything. This is strictly the total change for all residential properties as opposed to the commercial sections. So as you see here on the left side, hotels are kind of the properties that were affected the worst in their valuation because of the pandemic, with shopping centers only slightly behind them. We have found that so far, medical office and office buildings are adversely affected, but really the long-term effect on that is still to be seen. Apartments down slightly, along with warehouses and other general commercial properties. And with mini storage is actually doing pretty well. And that's not really a surprise to me. I think one of the board members, Board of Supervisor members pointed out the mini storage doesn't have staff that's working there in interaction with the public. So it's kind of isolated from the pandemic effect. General commercial really covers all of your groupings that are single tenant or single owner occupied properties. It could be a fast food restaurant if it's standalone, or any other type of big box property like Walmart or Lowe's. any property like that. The other groupings are properties that we typically assess or value by the income approach. So your hotels and shopping centers, offices and apartments are generally driven or primarily driven by the income or the rent that is produced by those. So that's why they are the most affected here. This slide shows a breakdown, and we're back to residential, strictly residential on the slide, based on a value range or a grouping of value ranges. So it generally shows that your lower value residential properties experience the larger increases this year on average than the higher range properties. And this is not surprising to us either, because typically you get a lot more mobility in the properties at the lower end. There's a lot more demand for those properties, and that demand is really what drives those values to go up. I do have a note down here at the bottom of the slide where we identify the median home value is now $354,500. And basically, because of this, if you were to, if a property at that value range experienced an average, the 3.2 that would be for that value range, that's where that 3.2 came from, they would experience $93.94 higher taxes based on no change in the tax rate. So we just give that for a little bit of reference for that median level. This is referring to the percent changes of properties. So it would be really easy for me if we identified that properties were going up 3%, that every property went up 3%. Then we wouldn't get, some people say, oh, I might go up 10 and this other guy went down 5. But the reality of it is there are different effects on different properties, whether it's where they are in the county or what type of property it is. And there's other information that's kind of changing along with that. And, you know, a lot of times we find when a property sells, we find out some information about the property that we didn't know about before. So that could cause those properties to change much more or less than the average also. But what this is showing is that 2,666 properties increased more than 10%. And the vast majority are kind of between that 0 and 10%, which is where we'd expect them, with the average being in that range, the average increase. Then there's a large amount of decrease, or a large amount of properties that decreased up to 10%. And some of this group of properties includes some of your land use properties where the land use values have changed this year. So there are two different, when it comes to a property in land use, we determine a market value and we determine a land use value. And the land use value includes rates that are determined by the state, by the SLEAC council. And they will set a certain rate for farmland, basically, for Albemarle County. And we use those on the land use side. Those rates went down up to 10%, probably 8 to 10% on average this year. So properties that are strictly in land use, this is the taxable value. So that would basically cause them to be in that group. This is the information that we provide to kind of show the support for the value changes we make. So I could sit here and say, this is the change that we've made. You know, we're up 3%, we're up 8%, whatever the number might be. But residentially, this is the support that shows that our information or the change that we made is appropriate. In 2020, we had 2,089 valid sales that happened in the county on residential properties. It's right in line with the amount that we've had over the previous 4 years, which is good. It gives us a lot of support. We're required by law to be at 100% of market value. And that means that practically that the median sale is at 100%. So we'll get calls all the time that, you know, I paid this much for my house and your assessment is this much. We will basically vary 10% above and below the sale prices. And that's within our guidance, our guidelines for doing proper assessments. Our center target is at 100%. And we want those assessments, basically the ratio that's created with those assessments. And that's how we compare all the properties. So you could sell a $2 million property or a $200,000 property. And the ratio is really what we're looking at. So if you're at 100% of the 2 million and 100% of the 200,000, that's the comparison. So when we take all of the ratios on all 2,089 sales, we then kind of determine the variance of the ratios. So the center ones are at 100%. And how high, how many fall within, you know, 5% either way, and how many within 10% either way. And that determines how well our model is working. So the fourth column here, the one with the variance, really is showing how we've been tightening up that variance of the ratios around the 100% in the last 5 years. So that 4.02, it works kind of like a standard deviation. So the majority of your properties are going to fall within 2 or 3 standard deviations, which would be 104, 96, 108, 92. So those numbers are good, and they're getting much better over time. And as a kind of a reference, the International Association of Assessing Officers has guidance that says that we should be within 15%, or our COD should be within 15, or be a 15 or lower. And we are reaching numbers that are getting down to 4. So that kind of shows that, you know, we're tightening up those numbers, and they're well within the guidelines. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, but I will entertain any questions that you might have. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. Is there any board members with any questions?
Don, I just wanted to make a comment on Peter's presentation. Actually, the Jack Jewett district went up the most because it's the best district. We all knew that, right?
I think that's a subjective determination.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I'm not allowed to say that.
Anything else? All right. Oh, Stuart, did you have something? Sounded like you.
Yeah, I was impressed by the way you're tightening up the model over time. It's good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it very much, sir.
Thank you, Roger.
Right.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Nice
This is
meeting
very
you.
helpful. All right, so next we have Steve Allhouse, who's going to who's the manager of forecasting and performance for the county, and he's going to talk about the county's economic outlook. Hey, Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. As was mentioned, I work in the Department of Community Development these days, formerly in the Department of Finance. Historically, I've given updates to the Board of Supervisors about the economy on a quarterly basis. So with apologies to Ms. McKeel, she's already seen this presentation a few weeks ago. But if you give me a moment, I will share my screen and let me know when you can see this. Okay, great. I will start the slideshow then. Before I begin, I just wanted to preface my remarks by saying that this is a very tricky time to be doing economic forecasting. Everything is being driven by the pandemic. And typically when economists do forecasting, they like to look at historical data. Well, the problem is we don't have a lot of historical data dealing with the economy and pandemics. In fact, you have to go back to 1918 to the Spanish flu pandemic to find any data that might be instructive. And unfortunately, back in 1918, not a lot of data was kept for economic variables. For example, we didn't have national income and accounting accounts set up back then. So economists are kind of flying by the seat of their pants these days. I'll be upfront about that point. Nonetheless, I've tried to piece together enough information to talk about where I think the county's economy will be heading in the near term. And so just to give a sort of a general overview, as we just learned, there are a number of things going on with the local economy, and some sectors have done quite well while others have not. Peter was talking about the real estate market. That is mixed. We're seeing some very healthy growth in the residential side of the market. Commercial, depending on what we're talking about, we might be seeing the market doing well or not. And it's also the case that overall the economy has got some bright spots and some that are not so bright. What I'm going to be talking about specifically are the county's job space, the unemployment rate, and also some items I think are important for looking at the local economy moving forward. Well, let me go first to the job space. This is a chart that I put together a few weeks ago. What this is showing is the total number of jobs in the county. I have to put a lot of caveats on this slide. For one thing, you might notice that the data ends for the quarter ended June of 2020. There's a reason for that. This data comes to me from the VEC and also from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics via their quarterly census of employment and wages databases. And unfortunately, these databases tend to run 2 to 3 quarters behind. So this, again, is very dated information. The other thing about jobs data is that the information is shown by place of employment. It includes all kinds of things. It includes part-time jobs, full-time jobs, temporary jobs, permanent jobs. So this data is a bit fluid, you might imagine. Having said that, what this chart is showing us is between quarter 3 of FY20 and quarter 4 of FY20, in other words, the quarter that ended in June of 20, the county lost about 10% of its job space due to the pandemic-induced contraction, recession. This is a huge number. This is without precedent of any time that I've looked at any data going back to data that we have. I've never seen anything like this. Not every sector of the job space, however, was impacted the same. Not surprisingly, and this actually ties into something that Peter was talking about a little bit ago, the 3 sectors that have been the most impacted have been accommodation and food services. So if you think of restaurants and if you think of hotels, there was about a 44% drop in that portion of the job space between these 2 periods, between the spring of 2019 and the spring of 2020 over the course of that year. Arts, entertainment, and recreation, we saw nearly half the jobs in that job space go away. And in retail trade, we saw a decline of about 12%. Together, these job losses in these 3 sectors accounted for about 65% of the county's private sector job losses. So in other words, the people working in these sectors disproportionately bore the brunt of the recession, of the contraction. As you can see here, you might guess that these jobs tend to be on the lower end of the pay scale. So what that's telling me is the people who are most affected were at the lower end of the pay scale. There's been a differential impact across income groups of the recession. Moving forward, I think we'll see some of these come back slowly. For example, if we see tourism rebound, which is very, very possible, we could see the accommodation and food services sector of the economy spring back. Arts, entertainment, and recreation. Keep in mind that the recreation sector includes things like health clubs. So we know that people aren't necessarily going to health clubs the way they were before the recession. So that sector might take a longer time to heal. And retail trade, we have seen a jump in the number of people shopping online. The proportion of sales going electronically versus bricks and mortar, that is having an impact on us.
Can I ask just a quick question? What, beyond the 65%, what were some of the other areas or that you saw a job loss in? Was there any concentration or another big sector?
It was spread fairly uniformly. One thing I did forget to mention, so thank you for jostling my memory, not all sectors lost jobs, by the way. There were two in particular: construction, which saw an increase of about 4%, and finance and insurance, which saw a relatively minor increase of about 1%. So it's not all doom and gloom, but again, these are aberrations. These are outliers from the overall picture. I have a whole list that could go down, but for time's sake, I won't go into. Kat, if you'd like me to send you the list, I'd be happy to do that or share it with the.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm really interested also kind of in ag and forestry and those sectors, the wine business, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll make a note to send those to you.
And Steve, just send it to everybody because I think we'd all be interested. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
What I'll do, Diantha, is Ms. McKeel, I will send to everybody my slides, which have reserved slides, which do the breakdown, which have a list. So I will go ahead and do that.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what do I see looking forward? This chart is showing us some information we've just seen. This was a decline that we saw in the third quarter of FY20 and the fourth quarter, between the third quarter of FY20 and the fourth quarter of FY20. So this quarter that ended in June, we saw that big drop. These first two numbers are estimates, given the lag between the reporting from the VEC and where we are today. These numbers are estimates, and then these four numbers going forward are projections. You're wondering, how did you do these projections? Well, there is a group that I belong to called the National Association for Business Economics. Each quarter, the membership is surveyed, and we give our estimates of where things are going to go in terms of employment, unemployment, consumer price indices, et cetera. And from that survey, I've looked at what economists are saying about the national level, and then I've translated that into local numbers. How have I translated that? Well, I've gone back and looked at historical data for many, many years that shows a relationship between changes in national employment and changes in local numbers. The relationship is not always consistent. Sometimes you can have jobs numbers going up at the local level where they might be going down at the national level, but I've identified at least one relation that I think holds pretty well. So I've used that without getting into too much of the detail. I've used that to make these projections moving forward. What I'm thinking currently, the quarter that ended in December, Q2 of FY21, is that we've most likely gained back about 40, maybe a little bit more than 40% of the jobs in our job space. As shown going forward, this would be a rather flat recovery. I don't expect this to go gangbusters in the next several quarters, but by the end of this next fiscal year, FY22, I would think that we've recovered probably 60% or possibly more. This is something of a conservative estimate, but something around the range of 60% or more of the county's job space that we lost. It could be higher, it could be lower. A lot of this depends on the pandemic and how quickly we can get through the pandemic. So necessarily when you go out more than just a quarter or two, you're really in uncharted territory, but this is my best estimate for the time being.
So just a quick question. You don't show us going back up to pre-COVID levels. Is that a conscious projection, or is that just based on what the economists
survey?
No, that's based on the survey, actually. I didn't make a conscious effort to censor the upper bound, but you know, and again, the farther out you go, the less certain your forecast is going to be.
Sure. Yeah, I was just wondering if there was some thought in there or some reason that we wouldn't come back to, or we wouldn't return to our full employment.
Well, you know, it's really interesting with the last recession. With the last recession, we did see job growth over time, but it was a painful recovery. And again, my fear is that with the coronavirus taking on different mutations and the the rollout going along, it might be a while. And I didn't specifically, again, I didn't try to put a ceiling on this, but that would be one reason or set of reasons possibly for arguing for a very slow recovery in the jobs numbers.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be slow. I was just just wondering if you had a reason for thinking it wasn't going to get back to.
And he did say it was a conservative estimate.
Yep.
It is conservative.
Okay.
One thing that economists are notorious for is we generally don't like to go out on a limb for hearing wrong. We're sort of like weather forecasters that way. These numbers could turn out to be better, but again, I'll go back to my mantra of, well, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Let me move on then to the county's unemployment rate. I wanted to show you one slide that showed the Board of Supervisors, and this is somewhat instructive. The reason I bring this up is that it gets at how backward looking these figures can be. This is from the US Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has a massive database, which it calls FRED. And this is showing the county's unemployment rate going back to the late 90s. These bands are showing recessions. And the thing that's really interesting about this is that the unemployment rate tends to go up during recessions, but it doesn't tend to peak until after the officially designated end of the recession. And you might say, well, what's the officially designated end? Well, there's a group called the National Bureau for Economic Research, which is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's the, quote, official arbiter of the beginning and end dates of recessions. And so NBER looks at all kinds of data and they say, this recession ended at such and such date. NBER has not come out and said that the recession we just went through or might still be in has officially ended yet. My guess is that they're going to come back in a few months and say it ended during the summer, believe it or not. Anyway, we'll see what they say, but in any case, the unemployment rate tends not to peak until after the recession. And the thing about this is that you can see here our unemployment rate jumped, just peaked massively in April at 9%. Had been, in the 2.5% range. And then it came barreling down to 3.8%, is the latest number I have, which is for December. By the way, this unemployment rate data tends to be much timelier than the jobs numbers. VEC and the US BLS tend to get these numbers out pretty quickly after the fact. So December is the month for which I have most recent data. One thing I should point out, though, that's really important to keep in mind about these unemployment numbers is this. They include only people who are in the labor force looking for work. And so if people drop out of the labor force, they're no longer included in the unemployment rate numbers. So it's interesting to note, in fact, crucial to note, that between December of 2019 and December of 2020, Albemarle County's labor force contracted by about 1,000 people. Now, if I were to add in those 1,000 and count them as unemployed, this rate would be about 5.4%. It would be up here where I've got the laser pointer at the moment. If I added in just half of those people, it would be down here, the 4.5% range. So somewhere, I think the true unemployment rate's somewhere up here, which historically for Albemarle County would be quite elevated. So this 3.8% number is encouraging, especially given that we were at 9% back in April of 2020. But you have to keep in mind that this number really probably is understated. All right, so let me move on then to my forecast. This slide is showing what we know already. This is an actual number for the quarter that ended in December. 3.8% was the average for the quarter. I've got this going down. Again, the methodology was the same with this slide as with the other. I've looked at the National Association for Business Economics survey, what economists are thinking is going to happen at the national level. I've used historic data to look at the differential going back many, many years between the US figure and the local figure. And again, that relationship can change over time, and it can change depending on where we are in the business cycle. But I've got a number that I've been using for this. And if I go down all the way out to the fourth quarter now of FY22, I get us down to about 2.4%. Historically, what I've told the Board of Supervisors is that I think, based on 20 years worth of data, I think the what we'd call the frictional rate of unemployment, or the natural rate of unemployment in the county, is somewhere around 3.5%. But I don't really believe that this number that I'm showing for FY 21, the last quarter, the June number of this year, would really be full employment. I think given all the people who have dropped out of the labor force, I think we really will have to wait probably about another year before I would be comfortable saying we're back to full employment. And that's assuming that these numbers go in the direction that I'm talking about. Again, it's really up to what happens with the pandemic, with the rollout of vaccines, and how comfortable people are getting out and doing things again. All right, so I've talked about employment, I've talked about unemployment. I want to talk about some factors that I think are positive moving forward, and there are several of them. And I am going to have to caveat a few of these because economists tend to look at data one way and other people tend to look at it a slightly different way. But let me go through these. The one that I've been talking about is the coronavirus vaccinations that are available. This does have the possibility, opens up the possibility that people might get out again and start consuming. By the way, private consumption is 70% of the US economy. So it's important that people start getting out and doing things again. The other thing that's interesting to me, and again, I'm gonna have to caveat this, is that overall, consumer confidence has been increasing since April. If you look at the data published by the University of Michigan Index of Consumer Sentiment, generally, that's been going up since the month of April of 2020. It's not been going up every single month, it jumps around, but the overall trend line is up during that time. That's good in the sense that if people are feeling more confident about the future, they might again go out and consume more after we get past the bulk of the pandemic. But I want to caveat this bullet point heavily. As I mentioned earlier, there are large swaths of our local labor force and in the United States generally that probably are not feeling increasingly confident about the economy or their own position in it. I'm acknowledging that. What I'm talking about is the overall number that the University of Michigan is publishing, but you have to keep it in the back of your mind. There are still people hurting in this recession and its aftermath. So when I talk about consumer confidence going up, I just want people to be aware that I'm aware that not everybody is feeling more confident. Likewise, for the increase in the overall US savings rate. According to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, US Department of Commerce, the savings rate doubled between December of 2019 from about 7% to about 14% in December of 20. That's a good sign in the sense that it might indicate that there's some pent-up demand moving forward. As the economy starts rolling again, people might feel confident and might have the ability to spend. But again, that's an overall number. It's not the case that everybody in the US is saving more or able to save more. Some people's savings rate has probably turned negative in the last year. The third point that is hopeful at the aggregate level in any case is household net worth. US Federal Reserve System keeps track of this and is showing that in the last 3 quarters, US household net worth has increased by about 11%. A lot of people are saving and also their property values, to get back to Peter's point locally, have gone up, and also with recent increases in the last several quarters in the US equities markets, people's net worth have gone up. Now, again, I have to heavily caveat these statements by saying not everybody owns stocks, not everybody has a 401k savings plan, not everybody owns a house. So again, there are large swaths of the population that have not seen their household net worth go up. But again, economists look at these numbers and they say, well, overall, this should be positive for the economy. Finally, I wanted to talk about the proposed federal fiscal stimulus. As you're well aware, President Biden has proposed $1.9 trillion in fiscal stimulus. That would be the equivalent of about 9% of US GDP in calendar year 21. It would be a huge number. I don't think we're going to see the full 1.9 trillion. I think for various political reasons, I think it'll probably be below that. But nonetheless, if it is substantial, that should have a good positive impact on the US economy and locally as well. One last thing I want to talk about was just a little bit.
Can I jump in? Just a quick question.
Yep.
There's been a lot of talk of people getting used to working from home, and that might encourage some movement out of the cities and I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how that might affect the county.
Well, you know, there has been some discussion about that, and this would get at a very long-range planning issue. A couple of things. If people are looking, particularly if the millennials are looking for lower density environments, and they start moving out of, say, the city of Charlottesville to the county, that could have an impact on us. But I think the larger issue is the remote work situation that we're seeing in the last several months. Anecdotally, I'm hearing things like, well, you know, from realtors, I have a client who moved down here from Northern Virginia. Their job is still up in Washington, D.C., but they're looking to live here and just work remotely. That could become, if that trend holds and if it accelerates, clearly that would have planning implications for the county, because now you would have people whose jobs might be elsewhere, but who might be living here. Historically, what that's meant when people move here, their jobs, they've come here for jobs. So you had the tax base growing with physical structures, housing, say, offices or retail or whatever it is. And then you had people working here who are earning those incomes. Now, there might be somewhat of a disconnect between the two. So that is something I've thought about. I don't know how that's going to impact long term. I don't know how long that trend will last or if it's permanent. Some people are arguing that we're seeing working from home as a long-term trend, that we're not all going to go back to the office. And there's probably a lot of truth to that. On the other hand, I'm not sure the degree to which that's going to hold up in months and quarters and years to come.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. The last two things I want to talk about really were the NABE survey that I alluded to earlier as it relates to U.S. gross domestic product. According to the December survey, economists in that survey were forecasting for calendar year 21, 3.4% growth in U.S. GDP. And 73% of the respondents thought that the U.S. economy would have returned to pre-pandemic levels by the second half of calendar year 21. This is a case where I think the economists are getting a little bit ahead of the picture. For one thing, I would like to point out the survey was released in December. The survey was conducted in November. November was before we started seeing these variants of the coronavirus popping up. So this second half of calendar year 2021 timeframe might be a bit optimistic. More recently, I was looking at the February 2021 Wall Street Journal survey of economists, and these numbers were very interesting. This group was even more excited than the NABE group about the prospects for real GDP growth in the US in calendar year 2021. The number there was almost 5%. And this survey also asked economists about calendar year 2022. The number there was 3%. Well, again, this first number is a lot more optimistic than 3.4%. And the second year of 3% would be a pretty healthy growth rate. The other thing that was interesting, though, about the Wall Street Journal survey was that the average forecast for inflation in the 2 years was just over 2% in both cases. I wanted to point out that this figure up here, this 4.87%, represents real GDP growth. Real meaning inflation's been stripped out. Well, if you're talking about consumption, if you talk about real activity plus inflation, you could be looking at some pretty healthy growth or pretty robust growth moving forward in terms of numbers that we would see in, say, retail sales and things like that. So again, I'm going to be optimistic moving forward. The only thing I would temper that with is, we still have a large number of people, again, who are hurting. And also, we don't know how the pandemic is going to play out. So just to summarize very briefly, I estimate that we've gained about 40% of the jobs that we lost during the last contraction. I'm forecasting modest growth over the next year. Our unemployment rate seems to have peaked at 9%. I don't anticipate anything jumping up and going above that in the foreseeable future. As of December 2020, we're at 3.8%. I'm expecting full employment sometime probably by the fourth quarter of FY22 or June of 22. And then, as I mentioned, there are some positive things going on with the economy involving savings rate, net worth, and consumer confidence, with the usual caveats. The impact of vaccination, I think, as long as things roll out in a timely manner and we can get enough people inoculated, I think that's going to be a positive. And then I'm heartened that a number of my colleagues at NABE are forecasting positive growth in GDP moving forward. And on that note, I will open up for questions.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate that. So what questions does the board have?
Got two.
Okay.
Steve, thank you. On the issue of one of the positive indicators you cited, which is twofold, and that is the increase in net wealth, and the component next to that was
Savings rate.
Savings rate, excuse me. Yes, right. I think we know, don't we, pretty much that which quintiles we're seeing those changes in, and therefore aren't we really seeing two things that could be graded as negative rather than positive, and that is rising inequality and housing cost crises that are appearing, and despite a recession where you're still seeing prices rise in many areas. How would you grade that?
Well, I would say that nothing ever runs unmixed in the economy. You're absolutely right. If you're looking at the upper quintile doing very well due to wealth creation, and because people are in that quintile are predominantly shareholders, equity holders, and own real estate, yes, by all means, we're probably seeing inequality rise in our country. I would not dispute that.
And what I'm getting at is that we might not expect much of a consumption bulge coming out of that as we move forward, as you might if you just consider it to be a general trend.
Right. I mean, you would expect that if the gains are concentrated in a smaller portion of the population, the consumption bulge would not be as great as if it were spread out more evenly. I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
Oh, I said I had two. The other one was, do you have any data on the way in which municipality, public jobs at municipalities have varied relative to state employment, state public jobs as well? We've noticed, of course, that Virginia on a state level has fared pretty well in terms of keeping revenue, at a more decent level than some places. And I haven't seen good data on the jobs connected to that, but I haven't heard much about municipalities and where they stand. What have you seen there?
What I'm seeing is a mixed bag. If you look across the country, some states have done quite well. Their employment levels have held up. Virginia, my recollection, don't quote me on this because I'd have to go back and actually look, but my understanding is that state employment has held up fairly well in Virginia. Albemarle, we've not seen declines like we've seen in other localities. But I will say this, it really varies on the locality. If you're talking about localities, for example, that are heavily dependent on tourism, those localities most likely have seen greater drops in their municipal employee numbers than others that are not as dependent on that. I would be happy to look into this more thoroughly for you.
And one of the connections there that might be worth watching is you mentioned the potential for a new stimulus bill coming out of the federal government. If they do fold in a state and local government assistance package, that could have significant and very rapid impact in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on whether or not that gets folded in. I know there's been some political discussion about folding it in versus not folding it in.
Do we know what the revenue, the tax revenue for the county from last year is? Is that information available yet, or is that still coming in?
That should be available through the Office of Management and Budget. I'm sure you could contact Andy Bowman. The revenues did come in about where we thought, maybe a little bit stronger. And I've now stepped back from that world. Formerly, I was responsible for forecasting the entire general fund, but I've since moved over to community development. But our revenues have held up pretty well, better than we expected, I might add, overall. Now, some have not. Some have not done very well. Our TOT, of course, was down because we've seen a hit to tourism. But generally speaking, our revenues have done pretty well, comparatively speaking.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a comment.
Sure.
Putting some context around this, last meeting we started at the global level, worked from the state level, and then kind of talked about the programs and policies that our department was putting in place to help the community. Steve and Peter did an excellent job of taking you into the granular details of what's happening locally. It's our hope that all this information will help inform this authority to make better decisions as we move forward about what programs to support, how we can best use our budget, and putting together strategies. So just wanted to make the connection between last week and this week.
Thanks. I do have one last question if nobody else has one. I'm curious, Steve, at the beginning you mentioned that you're breaking new ground here in terms of the information you have, and I'd just be curious what you found most surprising as you were trying to forecast and looking at this information as, in your experience.
Well, my biggest surprise was how fast things on the unemployment rate turned around. That was not expected. When we were entering this contraction back in the spring, frankly, I was worried that we were going to see first of all, I was worried that we were going to see double-digit unemployment in the county of Albemarle. Secondly, if you had told me that it would turn around as quickly as it did, I would have thought that you were just daydreaming. So that was one piece that really surprised me. The other thing that surprised me was, and this relates to the county's budget, was what Peter Lynch was talking about with the residential real estate prices. He and I had a conversation back in February and March, and we were scared to death. We didn't think that the real estate market would necessarily hold up as well as it had. And again, looking at the commercial side of the market, that's really a mixed bag. He and I kind of thought that maybe something like that might happen, where you had, your big box, essential service retailers and these big boxes doing quite well, and then the mom and pops not doing quite as well, and the strip mall is suffering as a result. So I would say those are the things that really surprised me: the unemployment rate turnaround, the residential side of the real estate market, and just the prospect that people that we've come as far as we have so far in such a short period of time. I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic, but again, a lot of my optimism is predicated on the idea that the vaccines will get distributed. We'll see people coming out and spending again. That we'll get back to something that's a little bit more normal than what we've been experiencing the last year.
Yeah, I mean, my own personal reaction is I think it's really going to depend on how many of these businesses, like restaurants, are just gone for good and how many of them are able to restart. I think that's the question we don't have an answer to.
Well, it's interesting. I do a lot of tooling about town, looking at storefronts occasionally, just out of curiosity. And what I've seen in the city anyway, and I'm assuming this is also true in the county, is that restaurants have gone out. Some of my favorite restaurants have gone out of business in the last year, and yet I'm starting to see new ones come in, sometimes in the same spaces. So I'm going to remain cautiously optimistic that we eventually will go back to an equilibrium where we've got a number of restaurants, a number of other types of businesses making a rebound and coming back in. In terms of office space, that's a bigger unknown. We're all on this meeting now on Zoom, working from different locations. I happen to be in my office in the county office building, but I could just as easily have been doing this from some mountain in the side of Colorado, I suppose. So I don't really have a sense long-term how this is going to play out. I think it's going to be, I think you're going to see some businesses say, let's go back into physical space. And I think other businesses are going to say, we really don't need to. So we'll see.
Yeah. Kat, did you have?
Yeah, I don't really have a question. It's more just building off what Dave was sort of saying, and something I'd love, not today, but longer term to think about. But as we define what economic health is, kind of looking at inequality indexes and, even local environmental health. I think, Albemarle County has always been very thoughtful of looking at economic development in this more holistic way. So I appreciated Dave's comment about, are we becoming an even more stratified community?
Yeah, well, it's a point well taken too. When I gave this presentation to the Board of Supervisors, I was following a presentation that was given by our Office of Equity and Inclusion. And I had to make the distinction. On the one hand, I'm presenting a cyclical analysis of what's going on. They were talking about some very long-term structural issues, which I acknowledge are important to the health of this community. So I'm with you. You know, previously when I was doing reports about the local economy, I was looking at the inflation-adjusted cost of housing and then compared that against inflation-adjusted average weekly wage. We have an issue. We do have an issue in this community, and I'm fully cognizant of that. And I think structurally we need to be aware of that.
Doug, did you have something you wanted to add?
I was just going to just reiterate, I think a point I've probably made before to this group, how intentional we were throughout the pandemic and remain currently in trying to keep our construction economy active. We maintained our office posture in our community development department. And that you're seeing that play out in terms of the new construction values, but you're also you'll see that play out in the employment figures in the construction industry in particular. And so it was intentional on our part to try to keep as much of our employment in the construction industry as viable as possible throughout the pandemic. And that is just acknowledging that that's played itself out. And the other point is you've also heard before, and Roger and Jennifer and JT talking about the programs using the CARES money that the Economic Development Office has been administering in an effort to try to keep our businesses as viable as they can. Those that maybe were destined to fail because of the pandemic may not benefit ultimately from that investment. But there are others who we believe absolutely will be sustained and will recover, at least in part, we hope, because of the investment that we've made in them to try to kind of keep them working. So just making those 2 points, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Any other questions for Steve? Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it. That was very helpful.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Steve.
So the next item on our agenda is the director's report. Roger, you want to take over?
Yeah, I think mine's pretty simple. Jennifer, you're up.
That's funny. So I just wanted to give you a little update on Biomic. About 3 years ago, Roger and JT met with the Seraphic Group, a primary business that produces a gut health supplement at their facility here in Albemarle County. During the meeting, Seraphic Group expressed the desire to expand internationally. We connected them with BEDP, and as a result, Seraphic Group's subsidiary company, Biomic Sciences, was enrolled into the Ballet program. A little bit more about the Ballet program specifically. It stands for Virginia Leaders in Export Trade. This is a 2-year international business acceleration program. Companies receive training as well as some international sales, plan development, educational events, and most importantly, market research. The program participants are eligible to receive up to $30,000 towards export-related expenses. And over 300 companies statewide have graduated from the Ballet program. We are happy to announce this week, Biomic Sciences has graduated from the Ballet program. And as a result of this participation, they were able to expand their trade market in Europe. But I would like to add that our work does not stop here. As a part of our business retention expansion program, our office will continue to partner with BEDP and Biomic to explore other opportunities provided by BEDP's additional services. And at a later date, we're hoping to bring BEDP's team to a future EDA meeting to hear more about the programs they provide, like the Ballet program and possibly the economic gardening program.
Are we aware of other county businesses that have been through this program?
Yes, sir. A couple off the top of my head, since I've been tracking it, would be Greenberry's Coffee Roasters, as well as Punch Out To Go. They provide business-to-business connections. And There is one more that is escaping my mind. But yes, there have been several
Okay, great.
programs or several companies that have gone through our program. And I think the next slide is yours, Roger.
Thank you. Well, this is just a general update. I'm going to ask you to think back to your orientation about Project Enable. And if you can remember, we have a goal, I think it's goal 3 actually, that talks about preparing our community to accommodate businesses. One of those programs includes site readiness. Our staff takes a look at our existing environment and the amount of product available. And our definition of products are available sites for businesses to locate in. So we have a wide variety of product that we would like to establish in our community. Those include some general ideas of rail serve sites, which to date we have none. It could be a large industrial site, which we happen to have a tier 4 site in our community. It's at the research park. It's 100 acres. So UVA Research Park, I guess the new name is North Fork Park, has a site there that's ready. You're aware of the ABC Albemarle Business Campus Public-Private Partnership. The economic development component for that was to create a build-to-suit Class A office space, which we have the opportunity to exercise in the next 5 years. Our community could also benefit from having a site available directly related to highway, directly adjacent to 64 in some way, shape, or form for convenient access to highway or interstate. And then the other is looking for existing buildings. We receive quite a few opportunities, or RFIs, if you will, from the state of Virginia to locate some primary businesses here and or retain some existing businesses here. Oftentimes those requirements include, they want a site that's already ready, if you will, something they can move into quickly. And we don't actually have that many in our particular community. I just wanted to make this Economic Development Authority aware that we have been continually doing due diligence on existing buildings in our community, which include Fashion Square Mall, Stonefield, Hyosung Plant. We've been meeting with owners, operators, general managers, and the like, in some cases, administrators for the town of Scottsville, just to inspect some of our existing buildings in our community. I really don't have anything to report about the future of these things or any redevelopment opportunity. I just wanted to inform this board that we're looking for space, and at some point, economic development staff will return to this authority and talk to you about supporting some initiative towards site readiness for an existing building. I'll be glad to entertain any questions that you may have.
Just wanted to thank you for including the Scottsville plant in that.
Sure.
I guess, Roger, just a little bit more about what this would entail. Are you sort of putting together, images and descriptions of the property and, posting them up to the state side, or I'd love a little bit more.
Yeah, at this juncture, we have no agreements with any of these buildings, if you will, so to speak. Whether it's Stonefield or Hyosung or Fashion Square, we just go out and visit these sites and do due diligence. Once we get an agreement with those folks, we'll be happy to put them on the VEDP's website, which also markets these sites to the world. These owners have different ideas about the use of their property. Some of them may not want industrial there at all. Some of the community may not want industrial there. So we usually reference the comp plan and make sure we don't get out in front of any land use designations first. So some of these properties may not be fit for those for industry, even if economic development thought it was fit for industry. The community may want a different use there. So we don't want to get out in front of those folks, Kat, but we will eventually find a location or two where we can accomplish the community's goals and the economic development goals concurrently. And when those situations arise, we'll be coming back to you to ask for support in some way, shape, or form. It's a long way of saying it depends.
All right, Roger, you got more?
No, sir. I just wanted to make you aware that we're working behind the scenes to find existing buildings. And when we show up at your doorstep asking for support, you'll be prepared.
All right. Well, if that's oh, okay. So who is this?
This is JT.
All right, JT, you're up.
You there, JT?
You're
We're not
muted.
hearing you, JT.
Give him just a second. We had this trouble earlier today.
How about now?
Yep, there we go.
Everybody's got me?
Yep, yeah.
Okay, well, sorry for the delay. Just like Roger, there are just a couple of announcements that I wanted to share with the authority. No action necessary. This is for information. As we've moved to electronic meetings, we have people who watch our meeting recording on YouTube. We have members of the press that are attendees for our webinar right now. So I wanted to use this opportunity to not only inform you, but also inform the community. There's a really great opportunity for our food and beverage businesses to take advantage of a free program. It's a food accelerator. Companies from the Valley and the city of Charlottesville are invited to apply. The application process is very easy. I think it would probably take 5 or 10 minutes for any businesses that might be interested. But much like the valet program that Jennifer just talked about for international sales, or like the Catalyst program that Roger's talked about previously, this accelerator program would help food businesses with things like branding and marketing, better understanding their value proposition. Virginia, as you can see on this slide, has a lot of food and beverage production for a variety of reasons, but agribusiness and food production is one of the county's targeted industries. And so this program started accepting applications yesterday, and they will be accepted through March 8th. And the businesses will be notified by the end of that week, and the program will start at the end of March. So it's a great opportunity for food and beverage companies that want to scale up. So this picture comes from a spread from the Virginia Economic Review magazine last year. I just thought it was kind of a cool illustration of everything around the state. So does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, where can we learn some more about this, and where can we point folks who might be interested in it?
Yeah, so this is through the Small Business Development Center, and I can provide both a PDF and a link to the SBDC website following the meeting for folks.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I know some folks who I think will be really interested in this.
Yeah, and you probably know, JT, and the rest of you've seen the bumper stickers, but there's a whole buy fresh, buy local movement in Virginia, and it's actually really strong here in Albemarle County, kind of a linchpin for it. And they're about to rebrand and send out, 1 million new copies of Buy Fresh, Buy Local guide. So that it'd be fun to get that information to them.
Oh, great. That sounds
JT?
great. Thank you.
JT?
Yeah.
In the interest of protecting the interest of my business partner, I don't see Pepsi Cola on here.
Yeah, well, that's a major oversight on the state's part.
I can step into that one. So this is an old shot, or an old one that he's pulled. We have since submitted Pepsi to the EDP to be included.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer.
She'll be delighted.
Any other questions about this program?
This is great.
Okay, well, great. Well, the next thing that I wanted to inform the authority about was, a few people have already referenced earlier in the meeting all of our efforts to get the federal CARES money out into the community last year. And we talked about it with this board several times through our LIFT grant and our Safe Spaces grants. Many economic development organizations are going into 2021 monitoring the rate of vaccinations and sort of asking what's next for business, How will businesses be pivoting? How will they be transformed? And what role can we play to best support them? One of the things that we've been doing is we've been connecting with our partners. I mentioned that the program previously from the Small Business Development Center, but we've been working with others to try to identify gaps in the support that's been provided, as well as survey local businesses directly. So what's shown on this slide is local business survey results, asking them what would be most beneficial for programming this year to your business. And both our partners as well as our own local survey data is showing that assistance with website and e-commerce development is far and away the most popular and most requested type of program. One of the ones that didn't score particularly well on our survey, but we did confirm through working with our partners, is that there are certain agribusinesses that did not necessarily meet all the thresholds for some of the federal support. And so we're looking very closely at how we can support those agribusinesses that may have been left behind. And some of the other programs, as you can see on the screen, that we asked businesses about were like loans or support with sanitizing their space following a COVID exposure, a continuation of safe spaces. That's what's referenced by the grants for temporary outdoor expansion. So just wanted to share some of that information with this body. As Roger said, we want to keep you well informed so that as we propose new opportunities, you're able to advise us and the Board of Supervisors on where we can get the best value. Any questions about this information or? Okay.
Well, one question, JT.
Yeah.
Do you have the survey results broken out by sector?
We did ask the businesses what sector they represented when they replied. And so we had a pretty nice cross section of manufacturing, retail, tourism related. We had 43 responses total.
I'm thinking that some of these might be much more attractive to some sectors relative to others.
Yeah,
and that might be
I'd like to weigh in on that too, Dave. You're spot on. For example, if you look at the agribusinesses that sell direct to market, when you dig down into the data, they rank that very high. While overall it didn't score well because it just wasn't simply germane to some of the other businesses.
Right.
Yeah, you're spot on in that. And we've dug through that data. We just weren't going to go through all of the report to you. We're trying to give you the macro level view. And I will say, JT referenced the partners and SBDC and CIC and some others. I'll also mention that the city is looking at this in lockstep with us. It just makes sense that collectively working with the city, we can accomplish more for our community than going about it independently. So whatever programs that come out of this, I would expect the city to be at least part of those that also are in the interest of their citizens.
Well, it seems to me that, the fact that people are looking for website help and e-commerce help is a real opportunity for working with somebody like, the business innovation with CBIC or, other folks to try to get those services and make people aware of them. That's a little surprising to me that's such a high, I guess it's not surprising it's a high need, but that it sort of jumps out compared to the other items on there.
Yeah, I think, Don, this is logic. There's no data to back this up, but we believe there are quite a number of businesses that were not prepared to use e-commerce in any form or fashion, country stores and or, certain restaurants, for example, to pick up takeout.
Right.
So they never put ways to accept funds electronically on the website, or they didn't use marketing. They counted on the local market. And we believe a high number of those have said, okay, it's time for us to move into a different business model.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Right.
All right. any unfinished business?
End the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I don't know, Doug, are you still here? Is there anything that you want to bring up, the pandemic related, that is appropriate to sort of share with this group? Or I know we talked last meeting about being supportive of doing what we could do. Is there anything you want to share with us?
I can certainly I can let you know that we continue to kind of attack the pandemic on two fronts with respect to our ongoing efforts to mitigate the virus spread, right? With the posture that we've taken with our direct delivery of programs and services as best as we possibly can, and keeping our employees safe and keeping our community safe. And so that work just goes on. It's interesting that it's been tougher to keep people focused on that because the vaccine has kind of taken over everybody's attention, and for all understandable reasons. And so we now are kind of juggling, kind of keeping people's focus on issues related to the virus spread. And now with UVA students back on grounds and issues that they will continue to have with just lots of people in close proximity, we just want to try to. So it's been a challenge try to stay focused on that. The larger issues have been around vaccine administration, both as it relates to our frontline responders, what we call the 1A category that are eligible for the vaccine. On the county employee side, as well as community members who fit into those early categories, 75 and older, 65 and older, those underlying conditions, and really working as best we can with our health district, which is not a part of county government, but is a partner associated with state government. And so it's just kind of created some very challenging coordination, collaboration issues for us as we help them, they help us, and we all try to help help the community. So it's been choppy at best. There's probably a lot of other words that could be used, but I'll just stick with choppy. I do think that it's getting better. The constraint right now is if you're following this, then you know. I'm sorry if I'm kind of overstating the obvious, but is vaccine supply. But the work that we have done is to position ourselves structurally so that when supply is available, which we expect it will be, if not in February, then perhaps in March, then we have an ability to really ramp up our ability to again get shots in arms. So there's been that's where the county's work has been in collaboration with UVA, with Centera, Martha Jefferson, with the city. And with the health district. We've trained volunteers, we have teachers, we have our emergency medical providers. We have a cadre of now trained, qualified vaccinators. This is not an altogether simple vaccine. It does have some, they call it, it's a little titchy. But once trained and whatnot, we do have a larger group that can then participate. So when we have the volume of vaccine available, we do think we've got infrastructure that we've been developing to help us get it out into the community faster. This is not, I'm not sharing proprietary information. This is information that we've shared candidly with our board, and urging everyone to stay patient as possible while we wait for the state and wait for the feds to get vaccines to the state. So that'd be the way that I would characterize it. We certainly are aware of the anxiety that it creates within the community, and we're just doing the best we can to try to mitigate that. But so two messages. Thank you, Don, for giving this opportunity. Two messages: stay patient with respect to the vaccine. We are absolutely preparing to be able to get it administered when more doses are available. And don't lose sight of the fact that we still have a virus in our community, variants in our community. And so masking, now double masking, 6 feet apart, is going to continue to be part of our message. So That's what I would say. Probably more than you asked for, but you asked the question and give me the opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go there. So glad to answer any questions anybody might have.
Thanks, Doug. I do think, as I thought about Steve's presentation, I think what we need to be, there's obviously a limited amount that this body can do in terms of the immediate needs of other than people volunteering to give vaccines. But I think we do need to be in a position that as we see how things turn around and where the holes are and where the areas in the recovery as hopefully we start to come out of it, that's maybe where we need to be thinking about what we can do to support, whether it's certain sectors or taking other steps to help facilitate those the businesses that Roger was talking about, the things that we have kept going.
Right.
Who needs that extra help? Because I think it seems like to me that the key of what we've seen over time is, obviously there's a broad brush approach, but really there are certain businesses that need more help than others, and figuring out who those people are and doing what we can to help them, I think is going to be critical.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thank you.
Anything else from any board members? Other matters? All right, so the next meeting is March 16th. And I look forward to seeing everybody there. I appreciate everybody's participation today. And if there's nothing further, then I think we will adjourn.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks a lot, y'all. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
We're green next time.